The Hidden Room. In the charming town of Redwood Falls, freelance writer Julia rents an Airbnb for a peaceful weekend retreat. The house, an old Victorian mansion, has been renovated, but it retains its antique charm. On her second night, Julia discovers a hidden door behind a bookshelf in the living room. Driven by curiosity, she enters the room, which is not on the house's blueprint. The facing room is like a time capsule, filled with artifacts from a bygone era. Victorian-era furniture, old paintings, and a collection of black and white photographs. The photographs, however, are unsettling. They show various people in the room, each with an expression of fear or despair. As Julia examines the room, she begins to feel an unnerving sensation of being watched. A cold draft sweeps through, despite there being no windows. The air is heavy, suffocating. She tries to leave, but the door through which she entered inexplicably won't budge. In her growing panic, Julia discovers a diary hidden beneath a floorboard. The diary belonged to Elizabeth, a young woman from the early 1900s. As Julia reads the diary, she uncovers Elizabeth's account of being lured into the room and becoming trapped, unable to escape. Elizabeth writes of her gradual descent into madness, tormented by unseen watchers and the room's oppressive aura. The diary ends with a chilling warning. This room ensnares those who enter, feeding on their fear. It will not let you leave. As Julia reads these final words, the room starts to change. The walls darken. The photograph subjects seem to move, their eyes following her, and the once antique furniture twists into grotesque versions of itself. Julia desperately searches for an escape. She tries to force the door open, to break it down, but it's as if the door is part of the wall itself. The room grows increasingly sinister. Shadows flicker in the corners of her eyes, the temperature drops, and the feeling of being watched intensifies. In a final attempt, Julia tries to break the window, but as she touches the glass, it morphs into a solid wall. The realization hits her with chilling clarity. She is now part of the room's sinister history, just another trapped soul. Months later, the Airbnb owner enters the house to prepare for new guests. He notices the bookshelf slightly ajar and finds the hidden room. Inside, he sees a new photograph on the wall. It's Julia, her expression one of terror. He shivers, feeling a cold draft, and hurriedly exits, unknowingly sealing Julia's fate in the ensnaring room. The house waits, its hidden room ready to lure in the next unsuspecting visitor. The previous guest diary. In the picturesque town of Willow Creek, nestled in a serene forest, Layla, an aspiring novelist, seeks solitude to work on her book. She rents a quaint Airbnb, owned by a friendly and seemingly helpful host, Jenkins. The house, an old Victorian mansion, is charming and isolated. On her third night, while exploring the house, Layla finds an old diary tucked away in a drawer in her bedroom. It belonged to Anna, a previous guest who stayed there a few months ago. The diary starts innocently, with Anna describing her enjoyment of the quiet and beautiful surroundings. However, as Layla delves deeper into the diary, the tone shifts drastically. Anna writes about feeling uneasy, sensing that she's being watched. She hears strange noises at night and notices subtle changes in the placement. Anna initially dismisses these occurrences as figments of her imagination, but the entries grow increasingly frantic. Anna starts to suspect she is being stalked. She describes the sensation of being followed during her walks in the woods and the feeling of someone lurking outside her window at night. Despite her growing terror, she never sees who it is. The diary becomes a harrowing account of Anna's spiraling paranoia and fear. Layla, absorbed by the story, starts to feel the same sense of unease, wondering if these eerie occurrences were merely coincidental. In the diary's final entries, Anna reveals a shocking discovery. She caught a glimpse of her stalker and recognized him. It was Mr. Jenkins, the Airbnb host. He had been disguising his presence, using his knowledge of the house to move undetected. Anna's last entry is a desperate plan to confront Mr. Jenkins and escape. Layla, horrified, realizes she might be in danger. She decides to leave immediately, but as she starts packing, she hears Mr. Jenkins's voice outside her door, asking in a tone that once seemed kind, but now drips with malevolence, "Is everything all right in there?" Frozen with fear, Layla understands the gravity of her situation. She is alone, isolated, and at the mercy of a man who is not what he seems. The story concludes with Layla cautiously approaching the door, her fate uncertain. Jenkins's sinister presence looms just on the other side. The diary remains in the room, waiting for the next unsuspecting guest, as Mr. Jenkins continues his charade of the hospitable host. The house in Willow Creek stands silent, holding within its walls the untold stories of those who dared to uncover its dark secrets. The Watcher in the Frame. Mia, a young artist seeking inspiration, rents a secluded Airbnb nestled in the countryside. The cottage is charming, filled with antiques and artwork, but one particular portrait in the living room catches her attention. It depicts a stern-looking man from another era, and Maya feels unnerved by his piercing gaze. As she settles in, Mia notices the portrait's expression seem to change subtly. A smirk here, a frown there. She brushes it off as a trick of the light, but as night falls, the atmosphere in the cottage shifts. The portrait seems to come alive, its eyes following her movements. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Mia tries to cover the portrait with a cloth, but the cloth falls off inexplicably. That night, she is plagued by nightmares of being watched and wakes up to find the portrait's expression twisted. The next day, Mia meets a local in the village who reveals the history of the portrait. It is of Lord Geoffrey Ainsworth, a malevolent figure rumored to have dabbled in dark arts. The villager whispers tales of the portrait being cursed. Anyone who stays in the cottage is said to suffer misfortune. Mia, a rational thinker, initially dismisses these stories. However, as she continues her stay, she experiences strange occurrences. Objects moving on their own, chilling whispers in the dead of night, and shadows darting just out of sight. The portrait seems to be at the center of these disturbances, its figure growing increasingly. One evening, as Mia sketches in her room, she hears a low, guttural voice. The portrait is speaking to her, its words laced with malice, promising her a fate filled with despair and sorrow. It claims that she cannot escape its curse. Terrified, Maya decides to leave immediately. As she packs her bags, the cottage trembles, windows shatter, and the air grows icy cold. The portrait's laughter echoes through the rooms, and Maya barely escapes as the door slams shut behind her. Mia drives away in a panic, her heart racing. She feels a sense of relief as the cottage disappears from her rearview mirror. However, her relief is short-lived. In the days that follow, a string of misfortunes plagues her. She receives unsettling phone calls with no one on the other end, sees fleeting reflections of Lord Ainsworth in mirrors, and her artwork becomes distorted with sinister images she doesn't remember painting.